David and Marianne, who will be taking the place of Paul as the Minute Secretary today. Apologies and leave of absence, we have a few to get through. So Mitch, Veronica, Serena and Ella are all apologies, and then absent we have Texa. With that, Jackie has just joined the meeting at 5:34. We'll move on to item 3, which is the disclosure of any potential or perceived conflicts of interest. Was there anything to note relating to the content of this agenda by way of perceived or potential conflicts of interest? If not, we'll move on. Item 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting and circular resolutions. 4.1 is the previous meeting's minutes. The motion is that the Guild Council approves the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 27th of the 6th, 2024, as a true and accurate record of proceedings at that meeting. Were there any issues arising from the minutes? If not, we'll move to, can I get a mover? Ray and a seconder, Callum. All those in favour, raise hands. Jasmine and Ben? Yep, perfect. That motion is carried. Item 4.2 is circular resolutions. There are no circular resolutions, so we can move on straight past that one. Item 5 is reports. Item 5.1 is the President's report. Jasmine, your report was submitted. Did you have anything to add?
I'll take my report as tabled, but happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. Were there any questions for Jasmine? Dylan?
Just on the student charter, just wondering how fast that sort of process takes, what degree of consultation will there be with guild reps and sort of broader students? I imagine this is something that will be many month sort of long process.
So the way that the charter is in effect now, so the student charter that everyone kind of signs on and agrees to hasn't been updated since 2008. So, and it was originally written between the guild and the university, and we don't really have any record on how consultation happened previously. But what I plan on doing is doing a draft and kind of working with exec and getting feedback on that, taking it to Reps Board for feedback, and then getting a kind of final endorsement at Guild Council. I don't think it would take too long. Erin's team is doing a draft based on kind of feedback myself and Joanne gave on the existing student charter, and then we're kind of going from there, but I don't expect it to take actually too long because it's only one page. It's like a 1 A4 page document.
Thanks, Jasmine. Jackie, I know you've got your hand up. Do you have a question for Jasmine?
No, sorry, that was previously raised from the previous motion. Sorry, I'll remove it.
Worries. Were there any further questions for Jasmine? Dylan Storer again.
Hi, Jasmine. You mentioned EdCon. I'm really interested in your reflections on that event and any learnings that the Curtin Guild can take if we are to look toward, or whether we should look toward hosting an event of such stature in the future.
Jasmine?
I'll be honest, in future, I will be including in my handover to not, for future presidents to not tender for EdCon. I think the behaviour of the NUS in the last few years has kind of remained exactly how it was, 30 years ago. But I think the organisation and kind of the organisation of the secretary in planning EdCon and kind of the planning committee has gotten quite bad over the last few years, especially talking to some previous campuses who hosted EdCon or even did the before COVID as well. And basically it was the last minute rush for a lot of us to get stuff done. And I think without me and Mitch, a lot of things just wouldn't have happened because the secretary and president of the NUS didn't organise it, neither did the education officer. I think overall it was really valuable for Western Australian students to be able to participate in EdCon and kind of really see what the NUS is about and what their student unions are affiliating to, what their guilds are affiliating to, especially since the NUS was founded in WA by Roger Cook. It was good to have kind of like a bringing it home moment. It hadn't been at Curtin in a few decades, and 2 decades or something, and it hadn't been in WA since 2014. So it was really good to have it overall for WA students to be exposed to the NUS and kind of get to meet other campuses for the first time, and a lot of Eastern States unions get to experience that far more frequently than us. So I think that aspect was really valuable. And we had some really fantastic workshops hosted by Amari and Xavier, and Razan as well hosted some really valuable workshops that were very well attended, and I think really added value to the experience of EdCon. But apart from that, there were some hiccups that I don't think are worth hosting EdCon again for, at least anytime soon whilst I'm around.
Thanks. Jasmine, were there any further questions for Jasmine? Callum?
Just on your reflection, you mentioned that you won't be, at least in your time, putting a tender in for any for the education conference. How else do you think the embarrassment that was EdCon, how do you think that's affected, in your position as president, the Guild's relationship with the NUS for the remainder of your time as president?
I think because I knew exactly what we were getting ourselves into, and I think especially since the beginning of my term, I've been in direct contact with the secretary already about a lot of the issues within the NUS, and been like, hey, just a heads up, you're breaking all these bylaws by not doing XYZ for your member campuses. Honestly, it was our relationship with the NUS is one of those things where there's a lot of governance issues within the organisation that predate, everyone that's in this, elected to these positions. But I haven't heard from the NUS since EdCon, but I think overall it kind of, I don't think it affected the Guild's relationships as much. I think it affected more the students and the kind of elected reps who hadn't participated in NUS activities. I think it kind of really showcased what, the worst parts of the NUS and the worst parts of the behaviour of some of the people within the organisation and the students who participate in EdCon and NatCon and things like that. I think it kind of had worse effects on that, if I'm being completely honest.
Thank you, Jasmine. Any further questions for Jasmine? If not, we will skip Veronica as she is absent, but I would ask members, if you do have questions for Veronica on her report, to direct them through to her inbox and she'll get back to you hopefully before the next Guild Council. We'll move on to Max, item 5.3. Max, your report was submitted. Do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add on my report. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Max. Were there any questions for Max? If not, we'll move on to item 5.4, the Vice President Sustainability and Welfare. Jackie, your report was submitted. Did you have anything to add?
No, I'm happy to take it as tabled, but I'm open to any questions if anyone has any.
I have a question for you. Did you manage to get through all of those succulents? Did you get to give them all away? Because there were a hell of a lot there, so...
Yeah, I did. I think I gave away over like 400 plants, and it was great because I was able to get over 600 responses for my Containers for Change survey. So yeah.
Yep, perfect. Cool. Were there any further questions for Jackie? If not, similar to Veronica, we'll skip Mitch because he is currently jetting over the Pacific and probably in Indonesia at the moment on his way back from Japan. So we'll go to item 5.6, the Managing Director. David, your report was submitted. Do you have anything to add?
Just a very brief one. There are a few items that sit on my report for an embarrassingly long period where I'm waiting for the university. One of them there is the WASM lease, and I do harass them on a regular basis. The most recent was this morning. So we'll see if that gets some action, but I am relentless, so just know that. Otherwise, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. I'll just note for the minutes that Noor has joined online at 5:43. Were there any questions for David on his report, Ray?
Yeah, just on, I can't see what page number it is on the report under the performance commercial services pricing strategy that a different supplier for barbecue supplies was trialled at EdCon. The feedback that I've noticed on the day that we had that barbecue was that it was quite poor. Is that quality being assessed at some point?
David? So the plan is just to continue as we are for the moment and make a decision by end of semester. There won't be price increases to anyone at the moment, even though the guild itself is wearing them. So the amount that the packs that subsidised will go up, and we've had mixed reports back. Some people said the service was fine from them, the sausages and buns, others not. So we just need to get our head around that a bit more. And then plus the other thing is we're just so flat out trying to make commercial viable that that's an end of semester activity to sort that out. But thank you for that feedback.
Thank you, David. Any further questions, Dylan?
Okay, David, sorry, I have a couple because I went here last week, so last meeting. The first one I noticed in this report was about the clubs running sort of unauthorised events off campus. I was sort of interested, is there anything you're sort of hearing from the clubs team in terms of why that is? Is it just they're just trying to avoid doing a simple form, or is the feedback they're receiving that it's our processes are too burdensome?
So firstly, the processes have been streamlined and the turnaround's a lot more rapid now. We've done a lot of work in that space last year. So I think that's certainly, well, absolutely it's working better. What we're noticing are two things. One is it's mostly off-campus events. So we believe it's more of an education exercise. Hey, just because it's off campus doesn't mean that you don't have to do that. And largely we're picking them up because we see on Instagram or Facebook, whatever social media, this club's running an event, and then that's when we go to them and say, hey, just in case you don't know, here's the process, any problems you'll have. So it's an education focus at this stage.
Thank you. David, any further questions? Dylan, again.
Hello. A little curious, I didn't know where to ask because obviously Mitch is on leave at the moment, so happy for anyone to sort of, but just in terms of like there's 5 policies like we've got on the agenda today, and I don't know, like they seem pretty important policies. We only got the agenda, you know, this wasn't through you, but I was sort of, is there, say, if we were to defer to allow councillors more time, is there anything in here that you think is particularly pressing that needs to be passed at this council? Or is there something, some way, because 2 days is probably not enough to sort of review the breadth of what's in some of these documents?
So yeah, you'd have to query the secretary/president on the timing of the agenda. So in terms of the contents that's there, the work health and safety plan is for noting. So it's not necessarily expected that there will be feedback on there. There's a subcommittee or a committee that looks at that. So they're basically really delegated the authority to do that. The safety policy, which is 2 pages, is very important, and that should be done. The other ones that are there, items, there was one which was really just to endorse an approach being trialled. And so I'm just trying to remember the other. Can you name some of them?
So there's a budget policy, risk management, and also an expenditure and asset policy. I think the risk management stuff is the biggest, sort of the largest in the pack.
So although some of those are reasonably sizable, it's the change. There's relatively few changes. So and those changes, like for example, if you look at the cover paper for the budget policy, those changes are very minor. And likewise for the so the 2 finance ones, one was budget, one was expenditure based, and the other one on the risk side of things, there were 5 changes, which were summarised by dot points. Everything else there has, excuse me, not enough Red Bulls Max for me. Everything there has previously been approved by guild councils in prior years, and there's been negligible change for those other things over the last 2 years. So that might give you a little bit of confidence there. I'll leave it to guild council if there are any of those other ones that they wish to defer.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Further questions?
Cool.
Yeah,
One more.
course.
Just sort of on commercial outlets, just looking at the money side of things. I'd be interested in sort of your overall assessment of where we're at. We seem to be overall performing fairly poorly in the commercial sort of scene at the moment. That's quite a bit of money going. What's your sort of, from sort of a more operational standpoint, what's your perspective on the commercial outlets, where that revenue's going to return? What are we actually doing to try and do that? Because it seems at the moment we're not really doing too much. I've got a list of ideas that I think might help in terms of commercial outlets. Like I think that there's some things that we may be able to change. I'm happy to chat with you at a different time, but it seems like what we're doing at the moment isn't particularly working. And unless there's sort of what your sort of overall view is on what we're putting in place at the moment to make sure that we actually start to at least turn this sort of fiscal issue around.
So if we just look at a broader context first off, so in Australia, expenditure in the hospitality area has gone down 13% over a 12-month period due to cost of living pressures. So it is an area that's getting hammered, cafes and restaurants. The costs have gone up 30% over 3 years. In fact, a bit under 3 years for most of the goods that we use. Wages have gone up over that period by close on 15%, plus there's a 1.5% super rise. So, and the number of businesses going bankrupt is double the rate or closing down of pre-COVID. So you've got that backdrop there. On campus, there are 2 cafes that have already closed down in previous years, run by Aroma, which is a relatively large group. They just found it unviable. Then in the exchange, I believe there are reasonable, that's just my personal view and kind of what I hear. So I don't necessarily have hard facts, but I do believe there are a reasonable number of outlets there that are struggling significantly, and I'd be very surprised if they all survive. So that's the broader background. In terms of actions, I've got a pretty large whiteboard with about 30 items on there that we've been working through. So there's actually a very large number of things that have been tackled on that. So there are an awful lot of things that have been done to date, and it's going to take us through till about November to finish working our way through all of those. So a huge amount of things, ranging from, a big part of it was the operating model was fine for a time when there are more students on campus and each person was spending more. So we've got less people spending money and each person spending less money as well. So, and then there's a lot more competition on the campus as well. So all of those things are sort of a perfect storm where in the middle of that mix, so to close the gap in terms of fundamentally we've got to streamline the model. So we've standardised offerings a lot more and done quite a few things, reviewed suppliers. So there's quite a long list of things I can go through. Essentially, to sort of part of the way in closing that gap, to do the remainder of things, it's really sort of pulling together a list, and there'll be some hard choices to make on that list as to which things we do to ensure that we're viable going forwards. So, and I don't think it's a matter at this point in time of, oh, well, this product might sell or that one's not. We've looked at all the sales. We know what's selling there. And it's really just first off streamlining what we've got and really minimising costs. I suspect we just need to outlive some of the businesses in the exchange as well. It's part of it, I just can't see any way it's viable for everyone to keep going. And then the one outlet that's really struggling, we've tried a number of different things, is Malacup. It's relatively close to Basement. So that one we might have to do something about, but we've certainly brought the cost down quite a bit and changed the way we're operating it. So we'll see how we go this semester. So I think November is when we'll be in a position to make the sort of final decisions as to how we need to do things for next year. And it's not easy.
Thank you, David. I'll take this opportunity to say that he's gone now, but Mitch Craig did pop in for 15 minutes or so. I was going to circle back to him for questions, but we might come back to that later if he rejoins. Were there any further questions for David? If not, we'll move to the motion. Motion is that the Guild Council approves the reports. Can I get a mover for that one? Tani, and a seconder, Callum. Can I get all those in favour? All those against? That motion is carried. Okay, Max is leaving the chamber at 5:55 p.m. We move on to item 6. Item 6 is business on notice. 6.1 is the safety report. The motion is that the Guild Council notes the safety report. That's moved by Jasmine and seconded by an absent Mitch Craig, so we will have to chase a seconder. Can I get a seconder first? Ray? Perfect. We'll move to any questions relating to the safety report. Were there any questions on the safety report for this Guild Council? Ray?
Just curious whether the incidents at EdCon are managed through our processes at the Curtin Guild, or if they are managed through a separate NUS process, or just don't factor into the safety report whatsoever.
Okay. David, I think. If not, Jasmine, maybe. David?
I'm aware there was an incident at EdCon, but in terms of being a safety incident and being reported, no, nothing was done there. There was no safety report lodged, so I don't know enough of the details other than there was a bit of pushing and shoving or something apparently.
Thanks, David. By my estimations, we've actually just lost quorum with Nor leaving the chat. So we may adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes and hope that she comes back, or Mitch or Jasmine. So 7, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there you go. Fair enough. I didn't count myself. Never mind. Yes, didn't count myself. Haven't had enough Red Bulls today. Never mind. We won't adjourn. Okay. Can I get any further questions on the safety report? Dylan?
Is that something that should be in the safety report, and the fact it's not in there, it should be added in if it was an incident that occurred at a guild sponsored event?
So in reflection, but based on what little I know, it probably should have been lodged as an incident and an incident report completed by somebody on the guild who was there. I mean, normally, I guess part of the challenge is on the vast majority, 99% of what gets raised occurs in an outlet or a premise or something that staff are involved in managing, and then those staff would lodge an incident report. This is something where there were no staff involved or anything else, so it potentially didn't occur to anyone to lodge an incident report. So it's a good point that no staff are there. There's an office bearer shouldn't still be lodging an incident report, but at the very least just following up with myself or another staff member, hey, what do I do in this case? So that is a good point. Follow up.
Yeah, cool. Could that put that on the actions.
Yep, of course. We'll add that
Okay.
to the action list for the minute secretary. I'll invite you to talk to the minute secretary afterwards if you want precise wording. Move to a vote, providing that there are no further questions. David?
If I could just add, and it also leads into a couple of the other agenda items, the work health and safety plan, and we had an existing one, but it's had a major revamp, in particular to align with the new safety legislation that was introduced last year. And it's also far more thorough with regard to responsibilities and what people are responsible for. So at the very least, I think it's important that Guild Council members read that part of it that specifically relates to their responsibilities. And that was an important thing. And because the legislation expects a lot more of people, that everyone knows what it is they should be doing. So have a look at that bit. And then the other key thing is the safety policy as well. It's been separated from the work health and safety plan to give it more prominence and to be something that's specifically approved by this body, demonstrating your commitment to safety.
Thanks, David. Any further discussion on the safety report? If not, we will move to that vote. Can I get hands showing being in favour? Those against? Yep, right.
If Jasmine has dropped out of the meeting, then do we now need an additional mover?
That is a good point. Yes, Jasmine is not here, so Callum, yes, to move. Then we'll move to the actual motion, which is that the Guild Council knows the safety report. That's now moved by Callum and seconded by Tani. Can I get that vote? All those in favour? All those against? That motion carries. Item 6.2 is the work health and safety policy. The motion is that on the recommendation of the Health and Safety Committee, the Guild Council approves the revised work health and safety policy. That's moved by Jasmine and seconded by Mitchell. Neither of them are here, so we will seek a mover. Ben to move. Mitch, can you hear us? We'll just change him to Jackie. Jackie to second. Was there any questions? That's moved by Jasmine and seconded by Mitch, but in this instance is moved by Callum, seconded by Jackie. Fantastic. Were there any questions relating to the work health and safety policy? Ray?
Just because it is a long document, sorry, not the safety policy, but I think this goes with the other documents. I do agree with what Dylan said earlier. I think we should probably suspend this to another meeting so that everyone has time to actually go through it and know what our responsibilities are before we then note it and all that.
Sure. Is everyone happy to adjourn the motion and reconsider at another Guild Council? Hands in favour? Those against? Yep. David, yes?
Out of everything that's here, the safety policy is a 2-page document. It is an important one. And even if you need to adjourn the meeting, pause it for a few minutes for people to read it now, I would prefer a request that that one be looked at. Other longer documents, fine.
Sure. I'll open it for discussion. Did members want to move it to the next Guild Council or take that moment now to read through the document? Just the policy. Just the policy.
Yeah,
Ray?
I think taking like 5-10 minutes to just read that policy and then moving the other documents afterwards to the next meeting would be an amenable solution.
Sure. Are we all in agreement there? Yes. Fantastic. We'll take 10 to adjourn to read through that policy and we'll come back having read that. we're back. Magic, cool. Okay. So the item for discussion was the work health and safety policy. Were there any questions relating to that policy? Ray?
I know this is probably in another policy somewhere. Are guild councillors considered to be office bearers for the purposes of this policy?
David?
A guild councillor is an office bearer, and they are also a worker. The definition of worker is very, very broad, so they're both.
Thanks, David. Were there any further questions on the work health and safety policy? David?
Yeah, I'll just make one comment. This policy is relatively standard, and I also just did a test against curtains, and this is relatively similar to curtains, much the same construction and much the same items in there.
Thanks, David. Anything else to note? If not, we'll move to the motion. The motion is that on the recommendation of the Health and Safety Committee, the Guild Council approves the revised work health and safety policy. Jasmine is still absent, so we're seeking a mover. Ray and a seconder. Mitch is here, but I don't know if he can hear us. Is that Mitch? Mitch has seconded. Can I go to the vote now? All those in favour? All those against?
I can hear you.
Mitch, I might interrupt you and say it's probably better to put it in the chat, and we'll get someone to read it here because it is about as disjointed as it can be. Is that okay? Just raise your hand for yes. Clearly not okay. Okay. Perfect. Jackie's hand has been raised. Jackie, did you have a comment to make? Mitch's hand is raised as well.
Oh, okay. No, now that Mitch has responded, I was just saying I was happy to second if need be, but it looks like he can hear.
Cool. Right. Thanks, guys.
I can hear, mostly.
What a joke. Okay. Move on to item 6.3. That is the risk management policy. The motion is that the Guild Council approves the revised risk management policy as recommended by the Finance and Risk Committee. That's again moved by Jasmine, who is absent. Can I get a mover? Alina, and seconded by Mitch. Thanks, Mitch, preemptively. Were there any questions relating to the risk management policy? Ray?
Sorry, I'm getting confused. My bad.
Okay, we'll let you have a bit of a look. Were there any further questions for the risk management policy? Have members had a chance to read that policy? Yes. Okay, cool. What we'll do, Ray, is we'll bookmark that and we'll come back to it. No, all good? Okay, cool. We'll move to voting. Can I get votes for those in favour of motion? Those against? That motion is carried. Item 6.4 is the risk management plan. The motion is that upon the recommendations of the Finance and Risk Committee, the Guild approves the updated risk management plan. Again, that's moved by Jasmine Tweed, who is absent. Can I get a mover? Max, and seconded by Mitch Craig. Thanks, Mitch. Were there any questions relating to the risk management plan? If not, we'll move to a vote. Can I get hands raised for those in favour? And those against? That motion is carried. Item 6.5 is the budget policy and expenditure and assets policy. The motion is that upon the recommendation of the Finance and Risk Committee, the Guild Council approves A, the revised budget policy, and B, the revised expenditure assets policy. That's again moved by Jasmine Tweed, who is absent. Can I get a mover? Lena, and seconded by Mitch Craig. Was there any questions or discussion relating to the revised budget policy and revised expenditure and assets policy from members present? Dylan?
I just think that, again, it's probably with the time frame, I think 2 days is too much for all of this. I've had it, like, in the time that I've had available to me, not enough time to, I've had time to skim through, get an overall view, but not enough time to, I think, to make a good decision on this. So if we could, with council's permission, possibly defer, I think that would be the best outcome in sort of from a governance perspective. Not that I don't trust what's being put up. I just think that, like, as a show of, like, good practice, we should have a bit of time to look through some of these, knowing that there's maybe 2 days would be enough for just some of these to go through, but because there's sort of such a breadth of different areas, I think that would be good and would allow councillors time to formulate any questions that they may have on it.
Sure. I'll open for discussion. Do members feel like they haven't had enough time to read through all of the policies? I'm getting heads nodded online. I'm seeing Mitch Craig's hand raised for some reason. That's okay.
That's because I'd like to speak, Ryan.
Okay, Mitch. Defend your late agenda.
Well, wasn't my late. I just want to, point out that Dylan Storer received this last week as part of the Finance to Risk agenda, but also that everything that's coming from Finance and Risk has also been interrogated by that committee, asked questions, amendments made. And we do delegate a lot of power to that committee and we put a lot of trust in those committee members. And I think that should be taken into account when we consider these policies are on the recommendation of the Finance and Risk Committee.
Thanks, Mitch. Dylan?
Thanks, Mitch. Again, I'm sort of speaking on behalf of councillors in general as well, who haven't had the same amount of time that I have to review things put forward. And whilst I have complete faith in the Finance and Risk Committee, I believe that it is not good governance to be putting forward such breadth of policy that needs to be approved to all councillors in our duty as guild councillors. On balance, we probably should look to defer or perhaps circular motion something to allow councillors the appropriate amount of time to just review the documents, which is our only job, really. But if we don't have the time to do it as volunteers, I don't think we're able to do that adequately and for us to offer what we should to the Guild.
Thanks, Dylan. Ray?
Yeah, also in response to Mitch, it's still coming to Guild Council. So whatever Finance and Risk did, we're kind of acting as an additional check and balance there. And if we haven't had the time to properly consider the policy, then on Guild Council, we don't know what happened in Finance and Risk. And that's going to impede our ability to make an informed choice about the document.
Callum?
I'd just like to, I guess, second what Dylan Storer and Ray have said. Dylan Storer may have gotten it a bit earlier than the rest of us, but I've just had a flick through of it. I was having a skim, and I didn't realise it's something like, it's a ridiculous amount of pages that 2 days was never going to be enough time to actually understand what was going on in it. So I would agree in deferring it for a later date or put it as a circular motion at a later time.
Thanks, Callum. I'll open this up further. Do we feel that item 6.6, the clubs and tax reporting item, should also be discussed at a later date? Perfect. David?
This item is just flagging an issue that currently exists and is just proposing that we investigate something. So there's nothing in here that's binding. The idea was there is an issue. The ATO tax department is going to be requiring clubs to report, do an annual report, even if they don't have to pay tax to the ATO. So we're just looking at a strategy and just want to investigate it. Really, it's just to advise this is an approach that could be workable. We want to just investigate it, and then we'll come back to Guild Council if we think that approach is the best one for approval and/or a different approach if we don't think that's workable. So there's nothing binding here for it. Essentially, it would to trial it would really just be, and we've already had advice, is having it would require some changes to club constitutions. So part of this would be, okay, if we're to do this approach, what kind of wording might be needed. So that's part of just investigating and how best might we do that. Mitch has got a few ideas, I know. Equally, can guild clubs have a sub-account of the guild, right? So once again, just can we set that up under our system? And part of all of this too is, with any of these changes, we don't want to make things harder for clubs. The idea is to make it easier. So part of this is just, if we go down this approach, could we make it easier for clubs? So really, that's all this paper's really saying, and it would just be with a few clubs' agreement to have them involved if we go down this approach. You know, what would it involve? Setting up a bank account under us, have a club try and use it for a little bit, and once again, that would only be with a club's agreement to trial it. So that's really all we're talking about in this paper.
Thanks, David. I know, Max, you've been involved in the production of this policy to some degree. Did you want to add anything to it?
David's covered pretty much most of it, but yeah, this is it's essentially just an opt-in trial, similar to when I believe it was a little while ago when we trialed for clubs to all move to CommBank. I believe there was an opt-in trial for a few clubs. This is a similar process, if on a larger scale. I've had a little bit of my own contribution in the production of this document. Essentially, it just functionally nothing in the day-to-day operation of clubs has changed with this because it is a trial. I do think this is worth, even if we have to adjourn and skim through it today, but I do think it's worth passing now just because there is a time frame limit on how long we have to process. Essentially, I think it is far better for us to read through this and pass it now, just so clubs don't have to deal with the hassle that is the ATO.
Dylan?
Yeah, on balance, I'm in favour of passing this. I think this isn't a policy. The motion is only 4 lines in of itself. So this is just a motion of sort of the will of Guild Council for the Guild staff and executive to go away and come up with something. I think that's fine. But yeah, I think to the broader point, if we are having a broader discussion, it is 117 pages in this whole agenda pack. 2 working days for volunteers that do have other commitments is not enough for us to do the due diligence that we're required to do to the Guild. On balance, though, I think that this motion is fine to do, but the policy stuff should be deferred.
Sure. So, our members, David?
I'll just flag too, often with this sort of thing, we just go about quietly doing it and then come with a specific proposal. But because of the number of clubs out there, a lot of you are involved with clubs and can get feedback, or somebody might say, oh, hey, what's going on? You're doing all of these changes. So part of this also is just making sure that you're all informed. If anyone raises anything, you know, and you can just say, look, we're just investigating some things. We're all about making it easier for clubs. There are some potential problems coming. We're trying to get ahead of them now and make it easy for you. So as much as anything, that was part of the process here as well.
Callum?
Just to get it clear in my mind, this isn't actually implementing this approach. It is just developing it and formulating a way to do it.
Absolutely. It's just testing it. Could it work? And a few clubs to be involved with it would only be with their agreement and understanding, hey, we're just trialling this and why. We'd already previously spoken to some clubs about having a bank account under the Guild, which they were quite happy to try that out, and that was with their agreement. And that part of this is actually just continuing that process. So nobody's bound to anything, no club's forced to do anything, and anyone involved is fully in the loop as to why.
just field sentiment, circling back to item 6.5. Are members happy for that to be looked over and circulated as a circular resolution to be approved in members' own time? Is that the sentiment? 6.5 is the budget policy and expenditure and assets policy. David?
Next meeting's fine.
Next meeting's fine?
As long as we've got it in place, because the changes are so minor, it's not going to affect us operationally, so I can wait till the next meeting.
Perfect. So we'll move that motion. The motion is therefore to defer item 6.5 to the next Guild Council, which will be held on the 25th of August. Can I get
On the 22nd of August.
22nd of August? Thanks, Mitch Craig, for that flawless agenda again. Can I get a mover for that motion? Dylan, and a seconder. Ray, fantastic. All those in favour? All those against? That motion is carried. We'll discuss item 6.5 at the next meeting. I'll field general sentiment again. Item 6.6, we're happy to discuss that here today. Happy to approve that here today. Fantastic, perfect. Item 6.6 is the clubs and tax reporting. The motion is that the Guild Council approves development and testing of an approach to A, remove the need for clubs to report annually to the ATO, B, be exempt from paying income tax, and C, improve club and financial governance. That's moved by Max, and Jasmine, who is the seconder, is absent, so I'll seek a seconder. Tani, was there any further discussion? I know he's covered it ad nauseum already. Any further questions or discussion on the policy? If not, we'll move to the vote. The vote, can I get those in favour of moving that motion? And those against? That motion is carried. We'll move along to item 7. Item 7 is the minutes of committees reporting to the Guild Council. 7.1 is the representation board held on the 20th of June. 7.2 is the executive committee held on the 1st of July. 7.3 is the finance and risk committee held on the 13th of March. And 7.4 is the legal committee, which obviously did not meet in this previous period. The motion is that the Guild Council notes the minutes of boards and committees en bloc. Can I get a mover? Dylan, and a seconder, Ray. And we'll move to votes. All those in favour? All those against? That motion is carried. Item 8 is general business. Was there any general business to discuss? I know under normal circumstances this is the most vibrant and engaging part of the Guild Council. Was there anything to discuss this time around? Callum?
It definitely won't be as vibrant, but I do just want to put it out there that I am the EdCon that we hosted, the education conference that we hosted, was a bit of an embarrassment for what we paid for it, and I'm sure a lot of people on the council and involved in the guild, it was their first time being involved in an NUS event or a conference, and it was pretty appalling, the behaviour from office bearers of the NUS, not only to allow that behaviour to happen, but it seems like it's quite recurrent between all NUS conferences, and even as our president said, it's just what was expected, and I think the guild may need to consider the relationship between itself and the NUS in coming years.
Thanks. Callum, was there any further discussion on Callum's point? Right.
Yeah, I strongly agree, Callum. In terms of it meeting the purpose of EdCon, I feel like it was an educating experience. I don't think it was educating in the way that the NUS intends. It was educating in that those of us who have never travelled to an NUS event now know why we should never travel to an NUS event. It was truly embarrassing, and for it to happen on Curtin campuses, and for us to have paid so much money and have sent money at the last Guild Council to the NUS is a shame. I believe we could have spent that money better if this is the behaviour of the NUS at the NUS, and for Jasmine to have not heard anything from the NUS exec since the beginning of July when all this happened is pretty abysmal.
Thanks, Ray. Mitch, I don't want to neglect you online. I did see you had your hand raised. Do you still want to make a point?
It's not related to EdCon. I had other general business.
Sure, provided that we're happy to move on, I'm happy to let you speak. Dylan,
speak
you have
on EdCon.
Yeah, Dylan has another
I
point.
think.
Just hold, Mitch. Yeah, Dylan.
Sorry, Mitch. Love you to bits. I think EdCon was an embarrassment. Not so much for the Guild, but for the NUS. It's a difficult situation to be in for us because I do believe that solidarity across the national student movement is extremely important, and student unions should be united and working together towards goals. So I believe in the NUS in that regard, and I do think that the Curtin Student Guild needs to be full-throated in that endorsement, but it's hard to defend such a broken institution. And it's very difficult for us, I think, as something that probably needs to be reflected upon through our workplace health and safety regards. If we're sending people to these conferences, what are we doing to provide the psychological safety required? And if we need to be sending people to conferences where we need to be providing psychological safety measures, is it worth us remaining and participating in that? So it's hard because I do believe in the NUS. I don't think we should pull out of the NUS. The NUS needs to get better, but I don't know what us discussing that in this council is going to do. Certainly more than us not discussing it in this council. It's a tricky situation, but I do think that it is something that I would like to see Guild Council and maybe the whole Guild, with including reps and the exec, really sitting down and sort of figuring out what is some sort of way for us to engage with the NUS in the future and hopefully to make the NUS better. I know when we discussed tendering for EdCon, we had a quite wide-ranging discussion on the NUS. It's one of the best Guild Council meetings outside of this one, I think. But one of the points there was what can we do with what's are largely relatively professionally run student-focused guilds in WA, and I know there's differences across those guilds that exist as well, but is there something we can be doing more locally to at least foster the kind of community that we want to see in a sort of united student movement, at least within WA? That may be somewhere we can start. That's my only contribution to this at the moment, but I do think that it is something that we should have a concerted effort to do, because NatCon will come around eventually and EdCon will come back around again. And if we just keep sending people to the events and they just keep getting worse and worse, it's difficult and relatively untenable because the NUS isn't currently achieving the objectives that it's supposed to do and what we pay membership for it to achieve.
Callum on the NUS.
Yeah, it'll be short, I promise. Just on my friend Dylan Storer's speech, he was saying about fostering cohesion almost between the WA student guilds. I have spoken to some of the UWA, their guild councillors at and outside of EdCon, and it is definitely something that they're open, from what I can tell, to fostering a bit more communication and working together to create, not to create anything, but just to work together in our approach to what we're going to do moving forward as a guild and guilds in this case.
Callum, anything else on the NUS? If not, Mitch, we'll come back to you.
Yeah. So
Anticipation.
what I was hearing in the bits that I could hear was that people weren't very happy with when the agenda came out because it was very long. So what I want to ask is, would council prefer that I send out the agenda other than the reports as soon as it's ready, rather than waiting for the reports and everything at once? Or do you want to continue to wait for everything to come at once?
Mitch, I'll just ask, is the reports the biggest waiting time in the production of the agenda? Is that why
The biggest waiting time is waiting for documents to be ready to be put in the agenda. The policies and stuff were ready, over a week ago. I could have sent them out. I was waiting for office bearer reports.
Thanks, Mitch. Callum.
I will note, I'll say that there is a document deadline that is in my Outlook calendar for the Guild for these meetings. If we're waiting for documents past that date, I don't see why we should be waiting for them when there is a deadline. It's been done in the past where additional motions have been sent out separately. So if the policy policies are ready and the 50-page policies and whatnot that's in this agenda are ready to be sent out, and we're waiting for a report, I don't see why that can't just be sent separately, especially when, given the 117 pages, 4 of them, for example, weren't ready as a report. I
So
believe.
is that a yes on the send the stuff out early, or?
We haven't finished discussion here.
That's my microphone is
Okay.
still on. I'm not finished yet.
Okay.
But to answer your question, yeah, send it when it's ready, because there is a deadline. There's not a deadline for the sake of having another event in my Outlook calendar. There's a deadline, or in our Outlook calendar. There's a deadline for documents to be there and for an agenda to be sent out in a reasonable time frame. Not the $2 days. Sorry, not dollars. That we had to review this, and I'll say it again, 117-page document.
Ray.
Yeah, I'm with Callum here, because it's, yeah, if those who are submitting reports are not submitting reports by the document deadline, then perhaps those people who have submitted reports late or intend to submit them late without notice should be penalised for that, as you would if a representation board office bearer would neglect to submit a report that month, or alternatively send them out separately as they come in, and send out what is ready at the document deadline on the Friday after that document deadline, or whenever you get to it prior to Guild Council as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'll quickly say, I just want to note that this last week has been an incredibly busy week, right? Being O week, it's probably the busiest week of the reps calendar, I would argue. It certainly was the busiest week of my calendar last year. So maybe there should be a bit of a carve out on this instance, just because, you know, how busy it has been. But in future, moving forward, potentially an avenue to do is like Mitch suggested, like you backed up, Ray, and like you said as well, Callum and Dylan, is to get those documents early and get the reports at a later date. But that's my 2 cents. I'll ask Jackie.
Yeah, you actually took the words right out of my mouth. I do appreciate that 2 days is not enough for people to go through the agenda fully. I'm glad that we're able to push the policy review back to next Guild Council, but yeah, it has been like a massive week, like in the lead up to O-Day, which was yesterday. So yeah, I think in this instance, there kind of is that reasonable reason of the delay, and I do apologize. I was one of the people who submitted my report late. I sent it in on Monday instead of on the Friday. But yeah, I think looping back to Mitch's point, if there's going to be multiple policies in the agenda, if we notice it's a bit of a chunky agenda, I think it might be good to send out the policies ahead of schedule. That way, you know, people have time to read it all. While I do agree that, you know, we need to be keeping to the document deadline, like everyone is here on a volunteer basis. And so, you know, we need to be doing the right thing and getting the documents to Mitch in time so, you know, he can create the agenda and send it out. I do support the idea that if it's going to be a chunky agenda with lots of policies like this one, or if it's going to be over 100 pages, then, you know, we can send out the agenda without the reports. And then when the reports are ready, in line with the document deadline, we can send that out. So I'd gladly second this if that's a thing. I don't know how this works, sorry.
Can guys, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this has happened before, right? We've had reports attached
In
post the
almost
agenda.
every other Guild Council this year,
Yeah.
it has come out within a few days of the meeting taking place.
Yeah, but my point generally is that if there's been policy to discuss, there's been an agenda produced, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and that's been sent through to members, and the reports have been attached kind of in a follow-up email. I think I join with the sentiment of Guild Council and say that that's probably the best way to go forward. I do note that Mitch has got his hand up again. Mitch, what do you want to add?
Yeah, I do just want to note that whilst the Thursday is the document deadline, just because I've got all the documents by then doesn't mean the agenda is ready to go out. There's a lot of everything on my end. I have to go through, check every motion, make sure it's compliant with the statute book, and then actually compiling it as well. It takes several hours to do it properly. So it's not always just, and also making sure I've got all the attachments, all the right ones in the right order. It's not just I click send once it's Thursday. I have to actually, there's quite a bit of work that goes into making an agenda. So even if everything is on Thursday, it will likely either be Friday afternoon or Monday morning that an agenda will go out if everything's submitted on time.
Mitch, can I actually ask what the publishing deadline is for the agenda? Obviously, we've got report deadlines on Thursday, the week prior to Guild Council, but what's the publishing deadline for the agenda? Is there one at all? Or?
There is not. Well, it's sufficient time, but basically the regulations say as soon as possible after the document deadline.
Relatively urgently, but it was so big it couldn't wait for the next meeting. It would put us in a tricky situation where we may have to pass something that we haven't read, and I think we all agree that that's not a great position for us to be in as the governing body of this organisation. But yeah, I think at least the weekend prior, particularly noting that Guild councillors are volunteers, we're not remunerated in terms of being able to go through and review this sort of stuff. So allowing enough time, not from a sort of a sympathy point of view, but just sort of like we've got to work and we've got our own sort of commitments on top of it. Like this isn't our primary job. At least the weekend prior, having that out on the Friday, I think would be helpful for councillors and would probably lead to what I think today has been quite a productive discussion, but would lead to good productive discussions in Guild Council as well in the future.
Yeah, and it comes back to good governance, right? And if the Guild councillors feel like they're being rushed in the articulation and discussion of potential motions and items, is that really good governance? So then we've made it pretty clear. I don't think we need to go through an official motion process, but should we just say, Mitch, in future, if it's going to be, as Jackie said, a chonky agenda, can we just send through those policies as soon as you get them, and then reports can be sent later?
I'm happy to do that. Yeah, there's no motion required. Unfortunately, this is also lined up with some leave that I've been taking, so as well. So some of the agenda making was left to Jasmine, some of it was done by me, which also led to the delays this time. But yeah, but we don't need a motion or anything. If everyone's happy for me to send chunkier policies earlier, then I think I can do that.
Thanks, Mitch. Everyone seems to be in agreement. So we'll just say that is the way forward. Is there any further general business to discuss? If not, we'll move to the meeting evaluation. That's Dylan Storer today. Thank you, Dylan.
G'day. I don't know why we do this, but anyway, minute that, please. Alignment of the agenda today. We've had some decent discussion. We've been productive. We've been student policy focused, very respectful, relatively accessible, particularly in the volume department that members not present may wish to note for future meetings. In terms of committee papers, provided the right information, yes, provided documents. I think perhaps a version of old documents, if we're superseding, should be provided so we're able to confirm. I think one of these ones, like the risk management, clearly outlined the changes that were made, and that made that quite easy to sort of see what changes we're making. But if we just presented the new document, we've got to go digging through and ask for the old document to see what changes are being made. That's not particularly helpful, and that could just speed up that whole process as well. And yeah, look, I mean, I noted the discussion we just had there regarding time of the agenda. I think the strengths of the meeting, we're working in a very collaborative manner. We're very solutions focused and focused on the good governance of the Guild. I think Guild Council asserted its autonomy as student control over the student affairs for the benefit of our members. We're very integrity focused in the pursuit of good governance of the Guild. Lots of goodwill in the council today, working in a collaborative manner, lots of discussion. I love to see. I think this has been a really good meeting in terms of us being able to freely discuss ideas and not be shouted down and focus. Like, we're really able to focus in on what Guild Council is supposed to be, which is the good governance and orderly management of the Guild.
Thanks, Dylan. I'll quickly join with you and say yes, it was an efficient Guild Council, and I believe too that there was good governance achieved. With that, we'll move to item 10, which is the next meeting. The next ordinary meeting of Guild Council is for Thursday, the 22nd of August 2024 at 5:30 p.m. To be held at Council Chambers. Documents and motions are to be motions and maybe the reports can be submitted at a later date, who knows. But documents and motions are to be submitted no later than 5 p.m. on Thursday, the 18th of August 2024, 16th of August 2024. Thank you, Mitch, for this fantastic agenda. To the Secretary, with that, I'll close the meeting at 6:44 and just quickly recap some of the terminology used today. We found out that David has a big whiteboard and that Mitch likes a chonky agenda. Thanks. Oh, David's got multiple.